We watched with great interest the meeting that your committee held to vote on the contempt charges for Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino. And it was the most coordinated sort of expression of exasperation with the Garland Justice Department for not dealing with those criminal referrals for folks like Mr. Meadows who have defied congressional subpoenas. Have you received any word or any update on the status of those referrals?
Well, since the business meeting earlier this week, we've not received any additional updates or communication about those cases. Well, Mr. Meadows is the one that remains outstanding. And the full House will have the opportunity to vote next week on the Navarro-Scavino motion that we moved out of committee for referring that to the Department of Justice. But, I think at the time, I was not alone. I echoed what some of my other colleagues said is, in order for our committee to be able to do our work, we need to hear from these people and the people who were directly involved in the administration, who will have insight into what happened that day. And you mentioned just a while ago, we've had so many people come before the committee voluntarily. Over 800 people have spoken to us. And even the witness we had today did that voluntarily and is providing facts. That's what we're looking for, is facts about January 6th and all the things that led up to January 6th.
And the witness before you today is Jared Kushner. Is that interview ongoing, or is he done for the day?
As all the interviews, I'm not going to comment on the specifics of when they start and end, but, as noted, he is voluntarily providing information to the committee.
I want to read some of it. It's so interesting that he becomes the first family member and the most senior administration official. He wasn't at the White House, but there's some great color on the role he played in terms of trying to turn his father-in-law toward the truth of his electoral defeat. I want to read some of that to you. This is from the book Peril by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. It says, on November 7th, the day that media outlets called the election for President-elect Biden, Hope Hicks met with Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner and several other Trump campaign advisors that morning at the Arlington campaign headquarters. Trump was playing golf at his nearby club in Virginia. Who's going to tell the president the race is over after he finishes golf? No one volunteered. Kushner, thin and with a soft voice, who served as the president's confidant, spoke up. There is time for a doctor and time for a priest, he said. He looked at several senior campaign aides. Perhaps they could be the doctor and give the president the tough diagnosis. Last political rights, if they ever came, would be left to the family, Kushner indicated. The family will go in when the family needs to go in, Kushner said, but it's not time for that. Can you characterize whether Jared Kushner ever had any question about the results of the 2020 presidential election?
What I'll say is that, we were able to ask for his impression about these third-party accounts of the events that happened that day and around that day. So he was able to voluntarily provide information to us to verify, substantiate, provide his own take on this different reporting. So it was really valuable for us to have the opportunity to speak to him.
It feels like what we don't know about this week may be even more significant than what has been public-facing this week. It started with that federal judge ruling on the John Eastman case, making an incredibly profound statement of likely criminal felony crimes being committed by Mr. Eastman and the ex-president Donald Trump. It was followed by this meeting, and you're right, I think 6 of the committee members made this point about DOJ's appropriate role in enforcing the subpoenas. And Liz Cheney and others have spoken about a role for DOJ in doing more than that, in investigating crimes where they have occurred. Is it still the belief of the committee that potential felonies have occurred and need to be investigated by DOJ?
Well, as a reminder, that there's 2 separate things happening. The Select Committee, our role is as a legislative and oversight committee and to provide recommendations so that something like this can happen in the future. The Department of Justice, their job, as the Attorney General Merrick Garland said in the comments you played around the anniversary of the attack, is to identify times that the law was broken and hold people accountable. And that doesn't matter what level. So the Department of Justice is operating completely independently from the work that we're doing on the Select Committee, but we're obviously looking at things that have to do with the same events around the same time frame, and the horrific attack on the Capitol that caused the loss of life and attempted to impede the proceedings of the government. So we're looking at the same things, but we're coming at it for a different purpose. And I do fully expect, as an American citizen, that the Department of Justice will, find any wrongdoing and hold people accountable.
Much has been made of, again, I want to always assert that there's likely more that we don't know than we do know, but what has spilled over into public about the aggressive investigative tactics the committee is using suggests that the investigation is professional. It is done sort of in concert with the best traditions of a thorough investigation. And some of the friction with potential witnesses have been around call records and communications. I wonder if there has been any discussion about the kind of evidence that if you were to make a referral, as it's been suggested, you might at the end. What kind of evidence do you, or what quality evidence do you have that you think might be of interest to DOJ?
We have been collecting factual evidence in a numerous variety of ways, including, direct interviews, recorded interviews, written records, logs, 80,000 documents or more at this point. I think that people have voluntarily and under subpoena turned over to the committee. And so that's the information we're using for our investigation. There has been no communication that I'm aware of to, transfer any of that information to anyone outside of the work of our committee.
A few weeks ago, and again, events intervene in all of our sort of public conversations about this, but I know that doesn't have bearing on the work of the committee. But Congressman Raskin described the momentum as being in your favor, as some of these decisions going your way. How would you describe the committee's momentum right now this week?
Well, I think that there is a significant amount of momentum. The ruling with regards to the Eastman documents, which will now be produced to the committee, is incredibly important because, Mr. Eastman was hiding behind this idea of executive privilege and attorney-client privilege and work product privilege, all of these different things that he was using as excuses to not provide information to the committee. But because of the facts surrounding, his interaction with the former president, the judge ruled that, there is a high likelihood that, a criminal conspiracy could have happened. And because of that, this evidence is not protected. So that has, opened the door for the committee in this case and potentially other cases where people are trying to withhold information for that to be provided to the committee for us to do our work.
I want to ask you a question, and I understand the sensitivities around evidence, so if it's something you can't speak to, I understand at the outset. But even this week, in the contempt referral for Mr. Navarro, what was presented by your committee was evidence that you have much of the Navarro story, and that the defiance of the congressional subpoena is it's more than a stunt, but it's less than a full blockade of information. He did an interview with my colleague, Ari Melber. There's a lot that we know, even from the witnesses that haven't cooperated. And my question is, how complete is the storytelling that you are in possession of now, even considering the defiance of some of Trump's close advisors?
What I would say is that, for everyone the committee has approached, it's best to get the information directly from that person. But, there are people who have made public statements. I think part of our argument was, how can he be claiming privilege about something that he's, gone on national TV and written about and talked about so much? I mean, how can he say that that information is truly, private and protected? I think he sort of, on his own, violated that notion. And, we are able to piece together information from lots of different people. If you understand that phone calls happen, that were two-way or meetings with multiple people, receiving information from, variety, one, both, many of the parties involved in that help us paint a thorough picture. And, something can happen. A meeting can happen in a room and 5 people can be there and 5 people can have, slightly different impressions, recollections of what happened that day or their interpretation of it. So it really is valuable for us to hear from every person involved.
Congresswoman Elaine Luria, my last question is about the timing of when this will be in a public phase, when a report may be forthcoming, when public hearings, maybe even in prime time, some of your fellow committee members have expressed some openness to. Is there any update on a schedule or a calendar for that?
We are working to do this later this spring, and we understand that a lot of people are anxious to hear the full body of the work that we've been doing. So we are working as rapidly as we can, but as thoroughly as we can. As you've seen from important witnesses we've interviewed recently, there's still people we need to talk to. So later this spring, and we will certainly let the public know as soon as we have a date and a concrete plan for those hearings.